Okay, here we go. And I was, okay, let me know if I'm not coming through this time. How about
You got
that?
it.
Okay, so, all right. Boom shakalaka. Welcome to this very special live episode of the Theater Podcast. I'm Erika Alexander. I'm an actress and an activist, an entrepreneur, creator, producer, and director. My company, Color Farm Media, has released our latest project, John Lewis Good Trouble, a documentary film about the legendary congressman and civil rights icon, John Lewis. This panel, composed of prominent people of color, Broadway performers, will discuss how to move forward from where we are and create an equitable, anti-racist, and safe Broadway community. We must help create the world we want to live in, and there's no better way to do that than through nonviolent activism and education. But before I bring in the panelists, I encourage you to have a productive and respectful conversation in the comments wherever you are watching right now. And if you have any questions for myself or the panel, please feel free to write them in the chat so they can be incorporated into our wider discussion if they're appropriate. And I'm going to introduce the panelists. And they're here. Our panel consists of 5 of the most talented, educated artists currently on Broadway, currently making her Broadway debut in Six, the musical, after coming off of the amazingly successful Chicago tour of the same show, is Brittany Mack. There you go, girl. Recently starring in the Color Purple revival and also now in Six, the musical, is Adriana Hicks. Recently seen in this little show called Hamilton, currently starring in Ain't Too Proud as Nick Walker. And recently starring in Freestyle, Love Supreme, Hamilton, and Aladdin, Tony Award winner James Monroe Iglehart. And currently starring in Moulin Rouge. Her previous credits include Rent and West Side Story. Welcome Tony Award winner Karen Olivo, K.O. All right, here we go. Now we're back to where we started from.
Perfect.
Nearly icebreaker for all representation in theater. I'd like everyone to answer if you like to. Did you see yourself on stage as a young person? What made you decide that you wanted to pursue a career on stage? And when you did, were you dissuaded or persuaded to do so?
Ladies first, please.
Ooh.
I can say.
Go boo. Yeah,
okay,
Come on, Brad. Come on.
I did. I grew up going to the theater. We had programs in our school that allowed us to go on field trips and things like that. So I grew up, my first influences of seeing Black people on stage was Alvin Ailey, American Dance Theater. And so because I grew up watching old classic music theater, Rodgers and Hammerstein, things like that. So vocally, there was my influence, but they didn't look like me. So, okay. But as far as representation on stage, it started in the dance community specifically. And then I said, well, I'll do that. So I started dancing first because that's where I first saw Black people on stage that looked like me and looked like my family and looked like people that I saw every day because I'm from the South Side of Chicago. So it was just like I saw one girl walking down the street and that could be her on the stage. So that was where my influences started. So I started dancing before I started training in musical theater. And then from there, started to see more Blacks in music theater, very far and few in between, but saw enough to know that I could do it. And where I saw holes, I wanted to fill them.
Awesome.
That's wonderful.
I know for me, I knew nothing about musical theater until I went to high school and I saw my first production of Guys and Dolls. And mind you, I lived in Texas. I grew up in McKinney, Texas. So having representation on stage for me wasn't around. But I did have me, myself, and I in my room watching Disney, watching Beyonce, doing my thing. And I knew that I wanted to sing. I discovered that I was like, oh, I want to act because like I'm putting on movies and I'm trying to imitate that. And afterwards, once I saw my first musical, like I said, Guys and Dolls, that's when I knew I was like, oh, you can do all three. Like I can sing, act, and dance. And that was my arrival into like, oh, this is something that I want to do as a career. And it's evolved from there.
Mm-hmm. James, K.O.
I saw Rita Moreno in the movie A West Side Story, and that was the first time that I'd ever seen someone that looked like she could be related to me singing and dancing. And then my dad explained to me that there was a place called Broadway where people got paid to do it. And so then I was like, oh, I'm going to that place. And then I went into school for it, and I was really discouraged because it was just me and a bunch of white girls. And I was like, I don't feel like I can have a career here. And then Rent came out, and I saw Daphne Rubin Vega, and I was like, oh no, I'm in the right place. And then I immediately moved to New York to be in that show. And then that started really my professional career.
Mr. Walker.
Oh, thank you so much, James. So I grew up in Boston, and that brought with it its own issues. Boston is I love my city. My city is also, I'll say, racially confused. And there's a lot of things that happen when you're a young black man growing up in Boston. I grew up on films. I grew up on movies. I'm obsessed with movies, and the stage was something that I did as a form of storytelling, but I was never like, okay, this is what I want to do. Really, it was about film. But then in 2001, I will never forget, I saw Jeffrey Wright and Mos Def in Top Dog Underdog on Broadway.
I remember
That it was amazing. And it was not only that moment, but it was the moment where I was like, not only was the stage something that I wanted to do, not only was it the first time that I'd seen black people on a stage when they weren't playing hyenas or sharecroppers, no offense, but like straight up, but it was also a moment of like, oh, you can actually talk about your trauma. You can actually tell a story about your history and put it on stage in a commercial setting where people will pay to see it. And that truly, that moment in that play defined my life. And I was definitely welcome. I would say in the second part of your question, was definitely welcomed into the theater, but it took me a second, and we can get into this later, but it took me a second to find my place as a young man of color in the theater. That took a long time. Yeah.
Interesting.
My mom is a music teacher and played at church to this day, and my father was an actor in the 70s, so I always saw some black man on the screen because it was either my dad or one of his friends. And then when I was really, really young, my mom and my dad both loved musical theater, so the first show I saw was a San Francisco tour of The Wiz, and Ted Ross was there. And the next, right after that, the movie came out. And so I saw Michael, and I saw Nipsey, and I saw Ted, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And so there was always theater around the Bay Area. So we saw Pearly, and so we saw all the different things with all these different black people. So I always saw black people performing. And because of my family, you can ask Nick, this is true. I'm kind of an egomaniac. So I never ever thought I couldn't do it. So when I got to college, and I was the only, in my college, there was like one black guy each semester. So as one graduated, the next one came in. So when I came in, I'm like, well, I guess I'm the next brother then. That's just what's going to happen. They were like, well, you can't play that role because, you're black. I was like, look, let the auditions choose who's going to play what. And so I've always kind of felt like that. So when I got to, it wasn't until I got to Broadway that I started feeling a little bit like, oh, there's issues here. Because, you start playing roles that are typically for what you consider, that whole non-traditional casting thing. It wasn't until I got like professional when I started feeling something. But even then I was like, well, if I got to be the first one, then I guess I'll be the first one. So, but I always this was all I ever wanted to do. From the first time I sang a song and heard applause, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to be on stage in front of folks.
So James, since you are talking about that, and let's all sort of maybe talk a little bit more about our own experiences as people of color on Broadway, the standout memories, good or bad, any of that made you feel seen or unseen in the business. Because you said, when you arrived, you realized, oh, okay, there are issues. What types of issues did you see?
I think they were never blatant issues. They were never like, shouldn't be here. But it was always that moment of when you went to the audition, and you would always be like, there was that look of, oh, well, why are you at this audition? It's like there's that moment where, okay, Miss Saigon's going to come out. So all the Asian actors are going for that. Color Purple's coming out. So if you go to the audition, you're going to see all your peoples. But then when there's certain auditions, if you go to Oklahoma and you show up and they look at you and they're like, oh, well, this is interesting. Well, what are you going to sing for us today? It's one of those things. You're like, oh, all right. Well, let me just do my thing. It was things like that. Or when you're in a situation where you're surrounded by the people with money, the producers. There's a certain amount of leeway they feel they have to say certain things or touch you when you're trying to talk, or the way they say things to you, or the I hate, forgive me for this, but the way the word brother is thrown around. Hey brother, and you're like, nah, there's an A on that, not an ER. You don't have to. Don't say it like that. Stop saying. And you got to be cool because you don't want to snap, because all of a sudden you will be the angry person of color who is snapped, and they don't understand why you are upset and why you're mad and what did I do wrong. And you're like, okay, let's back things up. You know, if I went over and just perched my hand on your wife's shoulder, you would feel interesting. That's why I feel interesting when your wife perches on my shoulder. I'm there, step off. You know, it's the little things that when you get to a professional setting, when there's money involved, where people think that you're not just a performer, you're kind of okay business to say whatever, touch whatever, do whatever, and you're so lucky to be there, it should just be okay. And you're like, no, that's, and I to be honest, I feel worse for the women, because the women of color have to deal with it even more than the brothers do, because there is a certain amount of fear. I hate to say it. There's a big black man walking in the room. Certain things you know you can't do, but there's just certain, when the women come in the room, they just say things, do things, and it just puts you in an awkward position, because you know it's not overly blatant, but you also know it's ignorant, and you have to, how do you fix it without sounding crazy, without, you know, throwing the race card down? Like, what do you do? So it was kind of having to navigate that when I finally got to this thing called professional theater.
Anyone else want to talk about their experiences? Good or bad?
Oh yeah, just to tag along with just meeting producers, going into my first Broadway show with the Color Purple revival. That was really interesting. I remember we had a meeting together, and they wanted to give us food and celebrate something that had happened. I don't know if it was a Hunter show or something like that. And I just remember looking at the producers and being like, there's no representation behind the table. It's all white, mostly male people who are funding this show. And I remember thinking to myself for the first time, like, oh, I want to be a producer one day, because I want to change the script. Like, I want to do that and see what it entails to actually put up a show of this magnitude with, because first of all, I was so proud to be a part of a show, my first all black cast show that I've ever been in. Because like I said, I'm from Texas and went to school at the University of Oklahoma. So I had a very different journey when it came to, you know, I'm looking at you, James and Nick, like everyone who had the ability to see black faces on stage, you know, like black performers on stage. And my very first performance that I ever saw all black cast was The Color Purple back when I was in high school. So just how it kind of made a loop, and then seeing that and seeing the producers, it just kind of put me in that place of like, yeah, I totally just tag along with you, James, seeing all of that. It's really there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, like I think coming from because I love the regional theater circuit, right? And so Six is my Broadway debut, but the audition, I've always thought of Broadway as a street. I've always thought of it as a stepping stone to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and the next meaning what other barriers, what other things can you do, what other barriers can you break down? And so coming from working regionally and things like that audition room, like James was saying, man, it's enough to make you know, I think it's part of what why people throw in the towel, or why people give up, especially people of color, specifically, not just Black, but Asian and Indian and anyone who has an interest in music theater. When you you don't see yourself behind the table, and then you start being asked certain things in a callback situation. Oh, can you, our favorite is, do you think you could try that like a little more, you know? And then it's you know, and you're like, I don't know what you mean. You know, it's like a favorite, and that urban, right? Can you try that more urban? And I was trained classically, vocally, And so I was like, I'm sorry, you want me to do a riff?
Yeah.
Oh
Right.
no, I don't.
Asking for more
I don't know.
voice and to be more.
Yes, can you sound a little more? It's the pause. It's that, and you're just like, no, I don't know. I don't know what that means, and I cannot. So much so that I took a break from because I graduated from AMDA, and so I being in New York and auditioning and was working and had a great experience regionally and off Broadway and things like that. But then you go in for these specific shows. I didn't sound black enough for The Color Purple. I didn't sound black enough for Motown. I didn't sound black enough for, and so I was like, but okay, cool. So when I went and I did cruise ships, and made a whole lot of money and taught myself how to sound a certain kind of way, how to hopefully maybe deliver this sound, how to come across sounding black, right? And so it's very interesting what your experiences are based off of what your influences are when you grow up, and as because you are a product of your surroundings, your upbringing. And so like James having all of this blackness like all around you, and you being like, yeah, so who gonna check me, like what? And it's part of, like he was saying, coming in and even on Broadway with these producers and things like that especially as a woman, it's a whole nother situation. I've never been that woman to be like, oh my God, hi, oh my God, Britt, whoop, hey, how can I help? How are you? How's it going? I've always kind of been that person, and it could be because I'm so petite. It could be because I'm just in a place where I'm not having it, or whatever the case may be. But I know that I have had very different experiences with producers and things like that on my first Broadway show that I think started as I've in my theatrical kind of journey to this point. So it does make a difference though, and being a woman is a whole nother thing to it.
It's funny because when I first started theater, there were very few things you could do on television and film besides Cecily Tyson or maybe somebody like Lorraine Toussaint, Regina Taylor. For the most part, you were expected to go into theater and do that. I did 5 plays before the Cosby Show plucked me off of there. And then and that was at the Public. And I did, finally television and sort of got into that space. And I find it unique that everyone then had an expectation that they would spend their lives in theater, not just people I knew like Sam Jackson and Tanya Richardson, but and every now and then maybe somebody could make a Yaphet Kotto move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were no black ingenues. There were no parts for them. There were, forget the fact that they were doing huge shows like Ragtime and Porgy and Bess and things like that. There were, in fact, the sound that you're talking about, Britt, I grew up with the Marian Anderson sort of feel of black women sort of embodying that very, the thing that you're saying they didn't want you to do. I want to know, when did they start thinking that we sounded a certain way on Broadway outside of like the jazz sort of things that the revival plays that they did? Do you feel like there was a point?
I feel like there was a moment. I feel like there was a moment. There was a sparkle, and then there was a moment. Now, I'm probably wrong on my history here, but there was a sparkle with The Wiz and Mabel King. There was a sparkle with Nell Carter and Ain't Misbehavin', and the 3 ladies in that wonderful show. I mean, they all were fantastic. But then Dreamgirls hit.
Dreamgirls, I was about to say, Dreamgirls.
And when Dreamgirls hit, there was a large black woman with a voice that was bigger than the house.
Jennifer Holliday.
And with Jennifer Holliday. And there's something about that gospel sound that touches people. And I've always tried to explain this because, not to toot my own horn, I won the Tony and I did a praise shout. And all of a sudden at the end of it, people would say, they would come to the line and go, hey, can you do that little dance you did on the Tonys? I'm like, it's not a little dance. There was a praise moment. I was giving praise to God, honest to God. I did not know it was going to happen. There's moments where things hit, they happen, you give praise, you move on. Well, people who don't live in that world don't understand that that is not a show. They don't understand that they feel something from the music, but they don't know what they feel. And so everybody wants to have that moment in the show. You know what we need? You know what we need? It'd be so cool if we could have like a gospel moment in the show. So here you have a show that has nothing to do with gospel, but we're going to put a gospel moment in the show. And so we need that voice. And, and what's funny is the thing that we call belting. There was a moment in Broadway where every ingenue pretty much sounded alike, and I may be wrong about this too, but I think it's around the time that Barbra Streisand came out and she like belted, and they went, "Oh my God, that's that sound!" And that was kind of like the black sound of belting, and everybody wanted to belt, so every woman had to belt, and so now every black woman has to like riff or scream or holla, and we're finally starting to get away from that because a lot of the black women don't want to do that. That's 8 shows a week. That's screaming. And also not many people have the skill set for that. That's a lot of the gospel singers, real gospel singers are getting vocal coaches so they won't kill themselves. But it was around Dreamgirls when that kind of sparked, and like all of a sudden, if you had a woman in the show, a woman of color in the show, it didn't matter whether she was black or not, a woman of color in the show always had to kind of scream and holler, and because it gave this feeling. And the feeling is great, but you have to know where it comes from. And also you have to know that everybody doesn't do that. That's not everybody's style.
Right.
So I think that's and they do the same thing with the dudes too. You know, I wanted to be in Dreamgirls so bad. It was one of my favorite shows, but I've always been a thick brother. And Motown and Dreamgirls, thick brothers, you were either fat somebody, big somebody, little big somebody. You weren't just in the group. You had a name and you did this fat thing. And that's, this is the way it is. So I had to accept that, but doors opened. But I think that was around the time that sound, and I'm not gonna name anybody, but there are a couple of writers on Broadway that no matter what show it is, there was always some form of gospel number, and I always kind of giggle to myself. I'm like, okay, I know what you're doing, and the audience is like, isn't this great? And they're clapping on the 1 and 3, and you're like, stop. And so it's just a thing. That sound will always be on Broadway, but
Got it. And Nick and I'll ask you these next questions. I want to acknowledge that all the challenging experiences we've all have happened to all of us, in our personal lives and certainly our careers. And with Broadway shut down and simultaneously the civil unrest, we have an opportunity and time to evaluate our situation and what is most important to us. We can learn from our past and focus on building a better future and a better Broadway. And to that effect, we need to start now to be the change we want to see later. James, it says here that you said if we tear Broadway down, we'll have nowhere left to work. So with that said, KO and Nick, tell us, since we're at least 6 months or more away from Broadway being able to reopen in any form, what are some of the things that we can do right now?
Please.
I think a restructuring of foundations and organizations is the thing that we need to start with, because systemic racism is something that is prevalent. We all know it. We can't hide from it anymore. And organizations have to think about restructuring what their rooms look like, what their boards look like. There cannot be equality if there's not equality inside all of those rooms for us, And so, I look at the way that we've priced out entire demographics and groups of people from our medium. They can't even afford to come anymore. Then I look at the fact that when we do shows, we have producers who are trying to tailor make the show for a very specific group of people that come from the Midwest. And when you look at this pandemic and when Broadway does open up again, do you think that those people, the Midwest is going to be rife with COVID very, very soon. Do you think those people are going to get on planes to come to Broadway? We've already priced out the people who would want to come. They don't feel like Broadway is theirs anymore. So we have to think about what we're putting on the stage. We have to think about the people that are actually making the choices. And we have to change what those managerial positions look like. And that comes with education and restructuring. I don't think we need to burn it down. I think we need to rebuild it smartly. And we have the time to do it. So we should really be thorough.
Right. If you have any thoughts about that. And by the way, as Broadway starts to reopen and existing productions are cast and new ones are written, what would you like to see happen as we reopen? Yeah.
So I am very, I'm very in line with the writer of my current piece, Dominique Morisseau, who, if you don't know her, she's an incredible playwright. And I have loved, as I've gotten into the Ain't Too Proud world, I've loved seeing her journey with the show because, okay, look, we're here to be real, so I'm gonna be real. I don't come to Broadway to see myself. I gave that up a long time ago. That's not what Dave Chappelle said it best: the intersection of art and commerce. And that's what Broadway is. It is the intersection of art and commerce. We are trying to find things to sell to you so that you keep coming back. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the right thing to be, but I think that's what we are. When I joined Ain't Too Proud, Dominique, in her amazing way, and excuse me because I'm not going to swear, but she was like, look, I know this show's on Broadway. F a Broadway. I don't care about a Broadway. I wrote the show for my people, for the people of Detroit. And she is the kind of person, the kind of woman, quite frankly, who has the foresight and the strength to say, this is my story, and I don't care who's going to come. I'm writing my story for my people. And if you want it to be on Broadway, that's your business. But this is my story for my people. I think that we have such a fear of shows not making it to Broadway. Let Broadway be Broadway. Broadway is what it is. That's fine. I go down to the public when I want to see some art. When I want to see some, the In the Heights and Hamiltons and Sixes of the world are exceptions to the rule.
Unicorns, yeah.
If those shows make it, that's amazing, and that fills my heart because y'all worked your asses off to get it there. Mm-hmm. But that's not why Broadway's. That might be my cynicism, but I'm like, but those shows are in the minority. And we have two choices. We can change that. We can fight to change that. And I think you're right, Karen. I think that is a complete restructuring. I think that is producers who understand that if you're investing in a Broadway show, it's a gamble anyway. What the hell do you have to lose? You're investing in a Broadway show. If you wanted a safe investment, go into stocks. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's not even safe.
Yeah.
So
it's safer than Broadway.
It's safer than Broadway. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you're putting your money into a show anyway, then we need producers who understand, you know what, this is a gamble anyway. Let me try to tell some truth and try to help some people. And that doesn't mean your show has to be serious. That doesn't mean your show can't be fun. But it just means your show has to be real. And that's what I think we so often get scared of. And the other thing, look, to this day, and I've been on Broadway now, for almost 10 years, but some of the best theater I've ever seen happen in a black box in Boston.
Sure enough.
We need to be lifting up other forms of theater. Broadway is a destination. It is not theater. Actors Equity goes all across the nation. And the final thing I'll say, and I promise I got off my soapbox, I was having a really interesting discussion with one of the producers from the Broadway League. And he was talking about how, quite frankly, to piggyback off what you're saying, Karen, like, we can't have the prices that we had before the pandemic. It's going to have to go back to the Joe Papp days of like, hey, you got $5 in your pocket? There's an orchestra seat open. Come on in.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad at that. I think that's possibly one of the best things that could ever happen to our industry because the kids who need to see this work are not seeing this work. Mm-hmm. The kids who need to see Hamilton are still, even with all that Hamilton has done, and I was in that show for 3.5 years, Edgehams, all that, still are not seeing Hamilton. Mm-hmm. We need to open the doors, and we need to open the doors so that people don't feel. I can't tell you in Ain't Too Proud how many black audience members are shamed because they're being too loud for Broadway when they respond in their seats. There should be no such thing. It's Broadway, y'all. Mm-hmm. Like, it's Broadway. Like, this is you paid so much money to get in these seats. You can respond however the hell you want as long as you're not hurting anybody next to you.
Come on.
So right. I'm sorry. There's a whole. I'll shut up.
Because there was no fourth wall for Jeannie could tell people that. So I would tell people, I was like, look, guys, this isn't Phantom. You can respond. You can say something. Say hello. I also think that when we talk about education, I think it also is an education of, I don't know how you guys were as kids, but I never saw what a producer did.
Yeah.
I only saw the performers.
Yeah.
So I only saw the performers. So when you're coming up, especially if you're a person of color. It's already hard enough to tell your parents, I want to be a performer, because they already think, oh my God, my child's going to starve.
Yeah.
Or or the unwritten thing they don't want to say, oh my God, they're never leaving the house. They're going to be here forever and I can't kick them out. And I've worked all my life to get you out of the house and now you want to be an actor. You know what I mean? Well, all we see is what's in front, so we don't see what's in back. We don't see that. We don't see the guys, and I'd say there are a lot of ladies, but we don't see the guys on the crew who are on IATSE who stay there forever. We don't see who make money for their children for like 3 generations. We don't see the writers. We don't see the music writers. We don't see the producers. We don't see the directors. We don't see the choreographers. We don't see them until after we're already there, and then you see all these actors saying, okay, I'll only do this for 5 years and I want to choreograph because I know what I want to do. What we need to do is also, when we bring the kids to the theater, tell them, look, it's not just this, because sometimes we make kids of color feel bad because they can't perform. You know, we always put kids in these colors of, you have to sing, you have to dance, you have to play sport or something. It's like, no. Are you good at math? You know what we need? We need a Broadway accountant. We need somebody who counts. We need someone who knows where the money goes. You do not play basketball well, but you're very well at putting together a team. You know what that is? That's a producer. That's a person who could put the writer, the director, and the person in charge, and that person does that. Those are the things we need to do. We need to bring the kids in and let them know what you're seeing on stage is not the whole enchilada. There is so much going on. There's so many other jobs for you to do that you can be involved, and that will put people in those places, because all we know is what's in front, and we've been told you can be an actor, you can be a singer, you can be a dancer, you might be a choreographer, but the directing thing, they really don't tell us that. And then when you do find that one director, it's like 3 of them. It's like, George C. Wolfe, Kenny Leon, and whoever that question mark is who comes in every once in a while and goes, I'm a director of Broadway play, then go back to television. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, we need to teach the kids that you can do more than what we're doing on stage, because what we do on stage is great. Yeah. But if we have people who know what's going on backstage, that's when we'll start having those other things, because it's like in business, if someone makes a decision, it's like those commercials you watch and it's like there's a hip hop moment and you go, there was nobody black on that team. There was nobody black on that team that said that shouldn't be on TV. And we see a commercial with that with all races. They use like somebody of color wasn't on that team. And it's not like it was bad. It was just an ignorant moment of like them not people not knowing, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Or it was all male team. And you were like, you probably shouldn't be selling that to women because you have no idea what you're talking about. So we did that.
Adriana, I want to ask a quick question because, James, thank you for elaborating on that, because that's important. The way that you're talking about that we need to show that there's more opportunity beside being on stage. But just do you think you can give me a definition of what's the difference between colorblind casting and color conscious casting?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that question. Just honestly,
anybody can answer it then.
Yeah, I honestly,
perhaps you can just give me what you think it is, and maybe somebody knows.
Well, from my experience with going to auditions and also being called in for roles that I was like, oh, I would never be called in for. It's just my definition of colorblind casting is just like, okay, these typical roles that are offered primarily to white performers are now like in the running for you to be able to take over that position. And it's not always necessarily the top lead part, female lead part or whatever, but someone like a co-star, like just right there. Like it varies, but that's kind of how I've defined it. And also like,
so what's color conscious?
Right. Just making sure that you have maybe like having that the token black performers in the show. Like having make sure you got at least 2 of them in the show, color conscious, and just like, so we can mix it up a little bit, but you still have a primarily white show. I mean, y'all help me out. I think that's.
No, I think you did a great job. I think that's it. I mean, maybe that's a different. What's the responsibility, Brittany, of the entertainment industry to make space for the trauma that's caused? It's people of color, artists, and workers. What's their responsibility?
I think just like the industry attempts or tries to allude to being color conscious, it's being aware of the effects of that, right? Of what happens is when you're the only Black or a token or someone in an all white cast, you're going to have that person, that Black person, that person of color is going to be uncomfortable, period. They're going to feel some kind of way. There is no one there that looks like them. You're talking about relating, you're talking about, and if you're talking about a Broadway contract, right? So anywhere between, depends on what it is, 6 months to a year, then you're in this position for a year. So then if something happens, which we've all heard stories, especially now, we've heard awful, terrible stories of people in the ensemble coming, leads, whatever, coming out saying, hey, like, I reported these different issues going on, or I reported, this happening, specific racial injustices and things that have happened within cast, reporting them to their stage managers and things like that. And the responsibility has not been taken, let alone these actors have not been taken seriously. And I think that goes back to the restructuring thing. It's an inside out type of situation. And so I think if you work something like that, a situation like that, there has to be some type of like, why is it that there's a chain of multiple emails coming out from someone saying, yeah, no, I did report it to my stage manager. I did report it to equity. I did go down the necessary chain of command saying these are the things that I did, and there was still nothing done. That something is wrong with that. So if we're talking about structure,
what is the remedy? What do you suggest? What can they put in place?
I think something that could be put in place is like a 3-strike system, right? If we're talking inside out, something where there has to be some type of, I think there needs to be an outside HR, some type of something that these things get reported to, because obviously wherever is getting reported in the ether, nothing's happening. So, okay. All right, fine. So then we have to have somewhere where these reports, these things go to, where someone is saying that's not so affiliated or associated with the theater and all the different stuff that goes along with it, right? And the mess that can happen. So, okay, these things have been reported. Great. This stage manager, this person has been reported 3 times by different people or much. Okay, fine. We can investigate and make sure that these things are whatever. But 1, 2, 3, you're suspended. Because let me tell you something.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, but Ko, you're shaking.
I'm sorry.
Make sure you speak after her. Keep going, Britt. Excuse me.
Yes, there has to be some type of system, because the problem is there's no repercussions. There's no consequences for these actions, for things just leaving or staying hanging, because as Black artists, as artists of color, the fear is if we speak up about these things that we'll lose our job. So our consequence, the way we handle it is, oh, you're going to lose your job. That's what it just comes down to. And it's not even, a lot of times it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Maybe if you don't come, so, you don't want to be the loud Black person. You don't want to be the angry Black person, things like that. So if I'm upset, if I'm like, people handle being upset, fear, all types of things, different ways. So if they're coming to your stage manager saying, hey, like, this is what's going on and whatever. But if it's a person like me who can speak very sternly about what's happening, then it's like, oh, well, she has an attitude and then it flips all of a sudden. There's so much that happens. So there has to be some type of outsource something, I think, that these things can be reported to. There has to be some type of system and some sort of, repercussions for people who are do you know what I'm saying? A 3-strike system. Maybe you get suspended. Maybe you lose some of your unions. Maybe you were suspended from the union for 6 months or something big, so that this doesn't keep happening.
Understood. Ko, what do you think about that?
I think that this boils down to education yet again. So we have people who are running companies and are producers who don't understand what it's like to be a person of color. And don't understand how to be a useful employer in a lot of senses. And so when things come up and they are trigger things for us and people get emotional, because this is still business, even though we are in the business of acting and art, let's be straight, this is still a business. We need HR. We need someone who's going to talk about the personal.
Yeah.
You can't assume that a producer, because they put money into things that are theatrical, understands emotions and understands trauma. And so without that, we're going to keep hitting these roadblocks. So we need to figure out a way to also give these producers, and I know a lot of producers want to do the right thing, give them the tools so they understand you need to fix something in here in the way that you interact with us, so that we can all give you what you need in the end. We need to work together, and that is education.
Nick, I'm gonna. This is, we talked about outside external trauma. What about internalized trauma? Can we maybe jump back to laboratories and universities that, I didn't go to school for this, but there are many times in an artist's life, it starts very early on, and they come to the stage with all sorts of things that have happened to them. So can Nick and James speak on that a little bit? I'm going to give a little room for some questions from people outside.
I actually, that's exactly what I want to talk about, because listening to this, the biggest thing, not only internalized trauma by the time you get to Broadway, but when you're on Broadway, all of the thing, Karen, I think you're exactly right. This comes down to education on the producer's part, but we cannot educate them if we are not unified ourselves. And if we, as people of color, are not making space. So I had this talk, and James, I hope you don't mind that I'm using our conversation, but we had to talk about the Antonios. Now, I'm not calling out I think the Antonios are a wonderful thing. I really do. But here's the issue. Whenever you have, and this is not to take it with both of you who won your amazing Tony Awards, were so well deserved, but whenever you have an award show, it by its very nature is a competition.
Right.
So all of a sudden, when you have a landscape where these people, you had Strange Loop in there. Now, people in our community don't know what Strange. We know what Strange Loop is. People in the Midwest don't know what Strange. I mean, they haven't marketed to the Midwest. So all of a sudden you have that show competing against blockbuster shows that have been, and all of a sudden it's fan service and it's all a commercial to get the word out, but you are putting black shows in competition with each other, or shows of color in competition with each other. Not only that, but I can't tell you the amount of, and this is nobody's fault, but this is just cultural. It's just what happens. We have a strata within our society as people of color. We do. And there are certain types of people of color that we like hanging out with, and certain types that we don't. And when somebody is angry and fiery about something, and we don't like that, and we think they're being too loud there is so much that we have to come together on. It's secure your own oxygen mask before you assist the child next to you. Right? The producers are the child. But we have to take care of our own stuff. And I'm not saying that they both can't happen at the same time, but I'm saying that to ignore what happens within our own circles. This is where James is my big brother and I'll love him forever. I'm a black nerd. I've been a nerd since I was in high school. I'll be a nerd to the day I die. I got a whole cupboard that my wife hides from me of Disney park memorabilia and comic books right in my room over there. So I can't tell you how often I have been, especially like early on in my experience in this world, like it was like high school all over again. It was like, oh yeah, we don't really know how to hang out with. So he's go over, and then all of a sudden I'm in an all black show, but I'm feeling like I'm the token back in Boston again. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some stuff we got to figure out. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill.
No.
Well, because the funny thing is what people don't understand is there is and this is it's one of those things where we as a group have to go for a focus, but we also have to make sure that we also take care of other things. What's the main focus that we as people of color are going to do now? But we also have to deal with our own inner trauma, and there are different forms of people of color. There are the cool kids and there are the nerds, and the cool kids sometimes bully the nerds, and when the nerds come up and do something popular, the cool kids don't know what to do because they don't do that. There is a group of people of color that all sing that way we were talking about, and they all riff and they all sing high and they can belt for days, and if you can't do that, they're like, oh, you're not a part of our group, oh, you sing like that. But then someone like Audra comes in and then becomes the big thing, and then the haterism starts. You know, it becomes like, oh, well,
Yeah.
you know, they like her because she sing like that. It's like, well, you don't know anything about Marian Anderson or people who came before that. You don't know your history enough for you to talk like that. So there is a inner trauma that we as a people of color as a group need to take care of. But there also is something that Karen said that is true. We are in show business. And we in theater, not so much in film, at least from what I've seen, but we in theater treat it like a family. And because we treat it like a family, we get our feelings hurt when business things happen. So stage managers are not managers. They call the show. A manager knows how to deal with different people's personalities in the show. They don't deal with everybody the same way. It doesn't matter, male, whatever. It doesn't matter, male, female, trans, white, black, purple, Asian. They know that particular personality. They know when KO comes in the room, we know how to deal with KO. We know how to deal with Nikki when she comes to the room. We know how to deal with Adriana. Stage managers need to be managers. We need to treat our business like a business. The culture that we have created from the first moment that I think Oklahoma started, we have created this, it's a family atmosphere. So the actors feel like we are all brothers, sisters, cousins. But the business people, we're family until it's time for business. And they do what is best for business, but then sometimes make us feel guilty when we do what's best for our particular business. We don't work for the show. We are all independent contractors. We are all independent businesses on our own. So we have to know our business, and the business has to be treated like a business. If it was treated like that, then the checks and balances would be there. I think there'd be an HR person. There'd be a stage manager who's above the stage manager who goes, what happened? What happened? What happened? There'd be a manager who can look at someone and wouldn't just go, oh my gosh, you're just having a bad day. No. What's really the problem? Is it cold in their dressing room, or was it something that happened before they got to work and the cold in the dressing room is what set them off? You know, we have to rebuild our business like a business. And for the actors to, once it's treated like a business, once we have it that way, not get our feelings hurt when it is business. Not be like, oh, me and the producer had lunch yesterday. Well, you can have lunch yesterday, but on Tuesday it's back to business, and you got to treat it like that. You have to be able to separate that. And I think once we get that in our own personal people of color thing, once people of color realize, look, we're all people of color, we're all black, we're all Asian, we're all Latin, but we're also singular people. We ain't always gonna do the same things. So stop trying to group everybody into one group. If we don't want white people to group us in one group, we as a people can't group us up in one group. And then be mad about something when it doesn't happen our way. It's like, well, how come they're not writing for us? No, not right. They're not going to write for us. They don't know how to write for us. Write. You write. You'll find someone to write. You'll find someone to produce. You do. You can't expect them, and that them is a terrible thing because it makes it sound weird. You can't expect folks who are not you to write your story. And then get mad when there's the white savior that happens. I get it. The structure's there. But if we're going to rebuild the structure, rebuild it right. And then follow the rules that we have put in place.
I think the same thing is happening in television and film, and for all of y'all who've done all these things. The truth is that Black people fall into a family naturally. I think it's a protective thing, and that has happened. I was a living single for many years, and the so-called family thing was told to us a lot, and I kept saying, no, I'm on Warner Brothers lot. And, and it really was important for me to separate that because I thought is a great manipulation to do that. And then suddenly you didn't advocate for yourself. You didn't even know you could because you kept feeling some sort of guilt about the hierarchy that exists. And it does exist. So I really believe that also performers talking to each other across platforms is going to be strong. I think we should have more of these discussions together because I think we could help each other. I'm going to play, Kale, I'm going to play a tweet. Apparently it's We See You White American Theater. And we'll play this and then you'll tell us about it.
I, Karen Olivo, Tony Award winner, in an effort to uplift my Black and POC community, vow to withhold my artistic force and services from any theater, company, or persons who would knowingly fund organizations that would perpetuate inequality. We work too hard to fund hate. If you want my services, show me the receipts.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I just want to really quick, that is actually that was just something that I did. That wasn't linked to anybody or any organization. Me and actually my friend Eden Espinoza started getting really angry because we saw a lot of the money that we were making going to candidates that would undermine us with their politics. And so we just decided the only recourse that we had was withholding our services, or just making sure that from now on we do better research on the people that we decide to align ourselves with, because we make millions of dollars for people. And we just have to be a little bit more responsible about where we're putting our efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's it. We're starting also an organization about economic transparency for our industry, which is, I think, very important, because when it boils down to inequality, I think it all boils down to money. Mm-hmm. And you can really tell where an organization is going if you look at their data. You know, the numbers don't lie, and that's irrefutable. If you have all white people working for you, then you're telling me something about what you value. Mm-hmm. If there's not gender parity in your pay, you're telling me something about the kind of people that you are. And then I can't really be crazy when I get into some sort of contract with you and then you treat me like I'm a second-class citizen. Had I looked at the numbers prior, I would have known, and I would have known to steer clear of you. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to create a resource for people out there, and that'll be happening pretty soon.
Listen, you also are speaking as a Latina and then a person of color, and therefore have a different experience, perhaps. There might be a lot of parallels between everyone who doesn't present as white and what other people of color do to be the best. You know, this is presented as an ally, but you're not an ally to me. You are it. So you said something really interesting here to Alan Seals during your interview for this podcast back in February. You said that every night in Moulin Rouge, when you are revealed to the audience for the first time, you have this moment of anxiety where you feel like you try to be the best woman of color the audience has ever seen. And can you just tell us more about what that meant to you when you said that?
Well, I play Satine, which was a role that was originated by Nicole Kidman, and it was done fabulously by her in the movie. And so there was always, you know, people who come to see Moulin Rouge know the movie for the most part. And even though there's a huge picture of me outside, and there's sort of a build up to Satine coming down on the swing, and I could feel sort of this sense of the air being sucked out of the room at times when I would come down, because I am not what they know as Satine. And so early on, I know that I was probably the only person who was clocking it, maybe a handful of other people, but it became a pressure nightly for me to be a woman of color in leading role in something that was originated by a white woman. I mean, it's not the same kinds of struggles that I think a lot of other people probably on this panel have felt. And I think that there's actually an important sort of place for what that is, but I don't know that necessarily that is as important as some of the other things that I'm hearing as far as like generational trauma and things like that are coming up. I feel like the Latin experience on Broadway is about being sort of tokenized and either tokenized or ignored. But I find that Black bodies are used in a way that I find reprehensible on Broadway at times. And so that's a completely different thing, I think. That's just my own personal opinion. Yeah, it's a very complex thing that I'm learning a lot about and trying to learn more about.
We're running out of time, but you played the genie. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I was about to say, I kind of felt that when the genie first came out, it was, you know, because it was Robin and all that kind of stuff. I really felt like I want to do this well, but I also want to show that there is a strong, intelligent, and talented Black man doing this, and I want you to know that. And because the great thing was I wasn't blue, so I couldn't hide behind just a blue character. It was me and glitter, and so they knew he was Black. And so there was a moment, I won't get too deep in it, but there was a moment where one line would bother some people in power, and they didn't want me to say it. They kept saying, well, the genie's not Black. And I was like, yes, he is. Yes, he is. He is. And so there's got to be a moment where, yes, he's a mythical creature, but the person playing him is black, so that moment is going to hit a certain way. And once we had, there's one of those moments where you like, once you have a discussion with someone who's actually listening to you, they go, you know what? I didn't see it that way. I don't understand. Go right ahead, do it. And once we did it, every time that moment hit a certain way, and the audience felt it, and you go. But there was always some moment where I was like, Nick will be with me. I don't want to do something too funny because I don't want to coon it up. And I don't want somebody to be like, oh, he's doing this. So I want to be funny enough where I'm still me, but I don't want to get to the point where like, oh, I know where that's from. It's like, you know, it's like there's this line you're crossing, your line you're dancing on when you're doing comedy, because you don't want it to go so far where they miss they don't see who you are anymore. So it was a very fine line of always coming out of the lamp and going, okay, let's do this, but let's also get that strong moment. So when the white folks see you, they respect you. And when the black folks see you, they are so happy to see someone that looks like them on stage doing what you're doing.
Thank you for that. Listen, we're going to have to close out a bit. And thank you, my darlings, for your time and for your truth and your real honesty here. I appreciate all the work that you do and the burden it bears on your body, literally, on your instruments and your psyche. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm great envious of you, because it's a real, I think, athletic thing that you do. And to do it in the rapping that you're in is fantastic, and it's excellence. I want to say that while systematic racism is nothing new, we are at the very beginning of a new movement. Reverend Barber calls it the Third Reconstruction. And just as Congressman John Lewis said in my documentary, Good Trouble, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not to say something, do something, get into trouble, good trouble. Can you quickly, all of you, just give us one little thing that you think you can recommend to the viewers at home to do to get into their own good trouble in order to help our industry and the world? Just quickly.
Can I quote something that I found in your documentary, which I'm going to have tattooed on my body? John Lewis says, when you lose your sense of fear, you're free. That one really got me.
I would tell people to learn more than what you think you need to know. People always want to learn exactly about, oh, I need to learn to be this, I need to learn this. Yeah, well, learn more than that. Go learn more about the sphere you want to work in, and then you'll know the business of whatever business you're trying to do.
I would say just continue to, especially for people of color, just to continue to tap back into identity, like fully rooted in understanding that you are enough, and dismantling the things that psychologically with systemic racism that is implanted within us, like to continue to go on that journey and to just continue to do the research and to educate yourself on like what is happening. And one of the people that I really look up to most recently, actually, Sherilyn Ifill, watching her legal defense in the NAACP. She's an incredible woman, a mediator. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will say, take your space. My mother's a preacher, and I have never seen another person who knows how to take their space. Know that the space is yours to take. Know that nobody is going to take the space until you take the space. It is literally your space. And you would be surprised at how much of a rebellion taking your space is. So take your space.
And Brittany, I think we've lost her. Listen, you wanted me to check out the live comment of Carl Lowe. So shall I read it, or do you want to?
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to know what because I think it got cut off, but I just didn't know what
he was talking about.
Yeah, where he's going.
Erika Alexander, that's me. I was in Deja.
Oh no, yeah, I know that.
Okay. So I was going to correct that now, but you want to know what the rest of it is.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what he meant by that. Because it seems like it got cut off on like a ...
It does, unless he was sort of being poetic for us. I don't know.
Yeah, that was it.
And he couldn't finish it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl, for that. He's talking about the branch universe theory. that they play with. And he's talking about illustrating, going back into time and doing something that could change the outcome of the situation that's already happened. And God has proved branch universe is not a theory, and he controls history. The Father, Son, Holy Ghost blessed me to share that with you in real time, what has taken place over the years to us as a nation to get to where we are today. The pebble that changed history is the rock. And so thanks, Carl. We don't appreciate that. And well, for people, Carl, you're watching or listening at home, please show your support in any way you can, whether it's financially or otherwise. There's some links to resources in the description of this stream. Where can we find you all on social media? If you can give us your social media, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at JM Iglehart and on Twitter at James M. Iglehart.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Instagram and Facebook for me under Miss MISS Adriana Hicks.
Mm. And mine's right there at Nikki Walks, NIKKYWALKS.
I'm Karen Olivo 76 on Instagram and Karen Olivo on Twitter.
Oh, take your space is what it was. Take your space is the quote.
Take your space. Okay, and I'm Erika Alexander, Erika Alexander the Great on Instagram and eAlex on eAlex the Great on whatever Twitter, and Erika Alexander on Facebook. And Color Farm Media is my company. Go to www.colorfarmmedia.com. To watch Good Trouble, you can go to www.johnlewisgoodtrouble.com. We appreciate the support. And then perhaps if you're interested in watching it through a portal, whether it's NAACP, the Poor People's Campaign, and or Color of Change, they also have portals where if you buy that ticket there, half of the net proceeds goes to the organization itself. It's one of the impact programs that we put into place and to honor and what John Lewis would want. Right now, everybody knows that he's struggling and putting up a great fight with pancreatic cancer and we don't know how long we'll have for him, but I want to put out there that I'm sure he was a person who loved art, and you could see that in the movie, and so he would love all of you. And I think that he sees you as his children, that he was trying to make the beloved community a lot safer for you. And so as you go through your careers, making that community safer for the people to come after you, I want to thank you because you're the gladiators and you're taking up your leg of the relay race now. And it won't be easy, but you guys are fast runners, you're great sprinters, and you're made for this moment. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Alan Seals, for inviting me to be a part of this. It's my great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And I want you to all stay safe and healthy because we all know that this disease attacks the lungs and the brain and uniquely the things that you guys need the most. So please stay safe. Stay safe. All right. And thanks for everybody coming out. Please.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all later.